Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. It's been quite a week in um, the news cycle. Of course, we're inundated by, the regular media crazy news of the current state of the world that we're in, which is sort of over the top. But now I'm talking about my sort of cosmic news feeds that come at me from various places. Some of them are digital news feeds, some of them are actual paper news feeds. My favorite, Science News. I've been taking this one for decades. This used to be published every single week, and it was very thin, only about 6 or 7 pages. Then they changed it to every 2 weeks, and now it's thicker. But this is the latest, the greatest, the soonest, the fastest breaking news that's happening in the world in scientific discoveries and new things that are sort of fascinating, mind-boggling stuff. And that's what all my news feeds are to collect. I'm looking for the most amazing, mind-boggling, scientific-based things that are happening in the world that flesh out the nature of reality and the nature of consciousness and the newest discoveries at the cutting edge. That's what I'm looking for. I also have news feeds on new discoveries in the science of health and healing. So I have neurology news feeds and research PubMed news feeds from the scientific and the medical world. I have news feeds from the holistic world, as negative as some of these stories can be, related to how the pharmaceutical industry sort of bends over backwards to scrap and destroy any competition that is not the medical system, because they have products to sell. The doctors and the nurses and the personnel who work in hospitals and medical clinics are really working their hearts out to help people. And they're doing the best they can do with the training that they got. And then that training forces them to use that training, or you can lose your license for practicing outside of the scope of your practice. Now, those have been released to a certain extent where we see something like the American Holistic Medical Association, which I have given presentations at. On the Scientific Sounds website, under the articles section, there is an article from the American Holistic Medical Association magazine on biotuning, this sound work that I do, because I gave a big presentation there. It's a very excellent explanation of biotuning. On the local front, we have a new puppy. And this is the cutest puppy in all of history. I don't know if it's possible for Shay to share a link or a picture in the chat of a picture of that puppy that Desiree took smelling a rose. But just from this latest science news that just came out, there's a big article from the heart. Deciphering the organ's messages to the brain could improve mental health and unlock secrets of consciousness. Now, I covered this in great detail a few live streams ago. The aspect that the heart continually is to amaze is of special interest to me and to us in our organization here, because we use heart rate variability, a special patented version of live real-time heart rate variability that we've produced. that shows living pictures of the functioning of the sympathetic parasympathetic live on a computer screen, so that we can tune sound waves to balance the core master system in your brain that tells all systems what to do. That's biotuning in a nutshell. But in the process of that, I have become an expert in heart rate variability. I've been a real student of the heart. Our heart has undergone a number of different amazing sort of discoveries they've made. Like, number one, they officially reclassified the heart as an endocrine gland. So now it really does fit in as a heart chakra, because each chakra has an endocrine gland that goes with it. And the heart was the only one that was not an endocrine gland. Then they upgraded it, so now it is an endocrine gland. On this same broadcast a few weeks ago, they discovered that the atrium of the heart, the upper chamber of the heart, has a cluster of what looks exactly like brain cells that generate electrical charges, and therefore this brain in the heart is communicating to the brain in the head through the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve is the master nerve of the parasympathetic nervous system, which is part of the autonomic nervous system, which is the automatic control of all my systems under the hood. The master control biocomputer program that tells all systems what to do is doing that in a feedback loop of information coming into the autonomic nervous system and signals going back out to make sure everybody is synchronized, tuned, tissues rebuilt, managed. And when you've got a fight or flight response stuck, rolling all the time, that system is disengaged and all my systems are drifting. And that's why worldwide modern medicine considers stress is the ultimate cause of disease. And how you measure stress? Heart rate variability. That's why it's the gold standard. So there was this, and these are things that I didn't even have time to, put into this broadcast. There was another article about new discoveries about the chemical origin of life itself. It turns out that it's not all that difficult to spark life if you have exactly the right chemicals, and it turns out they've just discovered those, and that whole story is now revised about the origin of life. In particular, they also have another article that came out that has talking about time, the nature of time, and that time may be a byproduct of quantum entanglement. So these are the kind of, and then there's a dozen others on my list. These are just the ones that came in the last few days that I make these broadcasts out of. For me, because a core basis of all of the things that I've seen with sort of like spooky action at a distance and entanglement and quantum fields and quantum foam and resonance and vibration and the fractal holographic nature of reality, where everything is reflected in everything else in miniature and in max. So the things in the grandest universal patterns are reflected in miniature in the quantum field. And we, standing dead center in the middle, is the lens through which these communicate with each other back and forth, with multiple examples of reflective patterns of fractalized repetitions of the patterns we see in grand nature and quantum fields and operating in my own body, in my anatomy, in my physiology, and in my consciousness. Those are the kind of things that I see repeating over and over again all these incredible discoveries that come through my sort of news feeds. And today is no exception, except today, I really have to put my another mask on, because today is going to be another one that is digging to the primal roots of humanity, of consciousness, of quantum field, of the grand universe as a whole. So, all these different things I've been showing in my news feeds are second fiddle to the stuff we're going to talk about today. So, you know how much I hate to do this to you, but we're falling down the rabbit hole again today. There's just no two ways around it. The nature of reality is stranger than fiction. Can't make this stuff up, and someplace down in the depths of Wonderland is the Cheshire Cat, which can either be there or not there. That if you remember, the Cheshire Cat in the middle of a conversation began to disappear, and he disappeared until the only thing left was his smile. And then even that disappeared. So is the cat there or is the cat not there? And, of course, this sounds a lot like Schrodinger's cat paradox to me from, Alice in Wonderland. But be that as it may, the end of this broadcast is going to be about this guy, S. James Gates, Jr., theoretical physicist who won the National Medal of Science and a whole bunch of other medals similar to that. So the guy is no slouch. It's important to recognize that when you realize what he's got to say about the nature of reality. So you've got to sort of hold on to your hat for this one. But as everything in Alice in Wonderland, we are not going to start with this guy. We're going to end with this guy. Where we're going to start is quantum consciousness, the concept that this whole broadcast is about today. So if you remember, in a previous broadcast, I talked about two things. One of them has got to do with the fact that I believe that sound is a primal moving force in the universe, and that it came first, and that electromagnetism is a result of what happens with interactions of sound waves sort of colliding together in the kind of patterns that we see exhibited in quantum field and in grand nature. Drop a pebble in a pond and get ripples, drop a bunch of pebbles and the ripples interact, and those interactions form all kinds of different things, like when we talked about sonoluminescence, that light can be produced from sound waves colliding, creating something called cavitation. And I see that reflected over and over again in all kinds of different things, including what we talk about here. Quantum physics and the consciousness of the universe. Surprising connections that reveal the need for conscious observers for the existence of the world. This is not new either. We've discussed this before, that the scientific community a number of years ago made a public announcement that they now believe that consciousness is a requirement for reality to exist, which means that the Newtonian world of math and physics as we know it, that governs all of this stuff and orbits of planets and that seems to work quite nicely does not work quite nicely past the wall of the periodic table, where beyond that point is the quantum world, which seems to be running on a whole set of different rules than we see operating here. And in those rules, reality exists as a probability to be something, but it can't actually solidify into that something until consciousness arrives on the scene to witness. And this delves back into the Schrodinger cat paradox. The cat in the box is both a living cat and a dead cat until you lift the lid and take a look. Reality itself is the next moment from now is an infinite field of all possibilities, but no single one of those possibilities pops into existence to be the next moment of our whole world until consciousness arrives on the scene. And consciousness arrives with an agenda. The agenda is, I believe this is what reality looks like, so therefore that becomes a path of least resistance, that reality pops into existence, because reality is an ecological system always looking for the path of least resistance to save energy. And I just supplied that with my belief system, that this is what it looks like. Scientists believe they've unlocked consciousness, and it connects to the entire universe. It's just a simple quantum wave that can interact with everything that's ever existed. And where that wave passes through from the infinitely large down to the infinitely small, it passes through us, dead center in the middle. It passes through our consciousness and into our brain, this amazing, mind-blowing structure in the universe. And consciousness arises out of all of these interactions to witness what's going on and make a decision based on my expectation about what the next moment will be, universe-wide. This brings us to a new concept that's out there called cubism. I have touched on this before in one of the previous broadcasts, but cubism is the simplest interpretation of quantum physics. Discover how quantum Bayesianism challenges quantum Bayesianism is QBase, QB. Quantum Bayesianism challenges traditional quantum mechanics by focusing on the role of the observer in creating quantum reality, as I just said. Quantum mechanics is a powerful yet enigmatic theory that provides exceptional control over atomic and subatomic phenomena, but its underlying mathematical principles lack a universally accepted interpretation. The theory hinges on the Schrodinger equation, Schrodinger cat paradox, and the concept of superposition, which means the cat is both a living and dead cat, where particles exist in multiple states simultaneously until measured, challenging classical physics view of reality. Measured means witnessed. Quantum Bayesianism, or cubism, simplifies this by treating the wave function as a personal tool for predicting measurement outcomes rather than a description of objective reality, emphasizing the fundamental role of the Born rule in quantum mechanics. Can you feel yourself falling down the rabbit hole here? So the basic tenet that we've discussed many times before is that the universe itself is a quantum field of all possibilities that are not manifest yet. So they're and they won't manifest until something comes along, consciousness comes along to witness what's going on. And that witnessing mixes with the potential to be something and chooses one of those infinite possibilities to pop into existence. And what determines that is a deep under the hood zone of my consciousness that my rational thinking mind up here is not really in control of. That is coming from down here. It's my basic core under the hood consciousness belief systems about what reality is and my place in it. So I begin to shift and change that, then it reflects itself in the choices of the infinite field, and new possibilities instantly become available. I believe that is the idea behind spontaneous remission of inoperable cancer. One day the tumor is there, the next day it seems to have magically disappeared. The doctors are scratching their heads, looking at their x-rays, wondering what the hell happened. But in the quantum field, this is business as usual. Particles pop in and out of existence all the time. Time flows forwards and backwards. Particles are, entwined together no matter how far apart they are. They influence each other's behaviors. Crazy things are going on under the hood here with a mask on it that looks ordinary. But don't be fooled, folks. As soon as you cross the wall of the periodic table, things get completely Alice in Wonderland. But this idea that emphasizing the fundamental role of the Born rule. So what the heck is the Born rule? Introduction to the Born rule. We know that we can't predict what will happen when we measure a quantum system, but the Born rule tells us how likely the possible outcomes are. So we start with our wave function, which is in a superposition of all possibilities. So superposition means living dead cat, except it's not just binary like that. It's living dead cat and every kind of cat and every kind of color of cat. If it is measured, then it will collapse to one of these possibilities. If consciousness arrives on the scene, measuring means witnessing. But in a laboratory, as soon as you try to measure something, it changes from a wave to a particle function and collapses into a certain possibility. To find the probability that it will collapse to this state, all you have to do is take its coefficient in the equation and square it. So never mind that little part there, unless you're a mathematician. Here's the example. The cat is alive, the cat is dead, but the math here is the same. 1 over the square root of 2, 1 over the square root of 2. So it's equal. It's a coin toss, whether the cat is going to be alive or dead. The probability that the cat is alive is 1/2, and the probability that it's dead is also 1/2, which means I flip the coin, and the coin gets stuck in its spin. It's slowly rotating, but all the forces of the universe, like gravity and all the rest of that, also don't exist yet until consciousness arrives on the scene, and the whole universe en masse pops into existence with all the cool laws that we see in the Newtonian universe, like gravity. And the coin falls down and hits the table, and it's either head or it's tails. But it can't be head or tails until consciousness arrives on the scene, and that is the Born rule. So it's the same math here and the same math here, and it's equal. Living, dead cat are equal until consciousness breaks the tie by arriving on the scene with an agenda that's expecting the cat to be dead or alive. We are the ones who, in all the universe, according to this quantum mathematics, that what the quantum mathematics of the Schrodinger equations and other equations like the Born rule have shown us is that this is a real phenomenon, reproducible in a laboratory, that consciousness is arriving on the scene, and then the wave collapses into a particle, becomes a thing. We stand in the center of the universe, the infinitely large around us and the infinitely small within us. We're dead center in the middle of that, making the decision, the tiebreaker decision. Is it this or is it that? So if we could manage this under the hood, what I call big mind under the hood here, then we could manage our expectations, we could manage reality itself, and that is what these live streams are truly all about. The idea of the mind link in the power of numbers to link all of our consciousness together with science and brain entrainment to see if we can shift the quantum field. All of these talks that I give about all this fancy schmancy information is to try to get us all on the same page about what that possibility could be and what kind of reality could heaven on earth even look like. This is Scientific American here. Is consciousness part of the fabric of the universe? A theory called Panpsychism proposes that consciousness is a fundamental aspect of reality. I did an entire live stream on Panpsychism. And that was 3 years ago. The origin of life, origin of consciousness. Another Scientific American article. Understanding consciousness is key to unlocking the secrets of the universe. The quest to understand our physical universe may depend on investigating our own mind. And it's the deep mind that I'm talking about. That's the part that needs to be investigated. Which brings us to this guy, Roger Penrose, Nobel Prize winner in physics for his work and investigations into the nature of black holes. So everything we currently know about black holes, it was this guy who started the whole thing and fleshed it out for us mathematically. And then everybody got on that bandwagon, including Stephen Hawking, the guy in the wheelchair, who took Newton's seat at so these people are no slouches. This is the smartest minds thinking about the deepest things, about the nature of reality and consciousness itself. And the more they dig into it, and the more math they do, they start to more and more become convinced that the two are intimately related, that consciousness and the nature of reality are intimately entwined. So no slouch, these guys. Some of the biggest thinkers in the world. And here we go down another rabbit hole within a rabbit hole. Introduction to quantum theories of consciousness itself. Packed inside a 3-pound semi-gelatinous mass inside your skull. Could be the balance point of all reality, from the infinitely small to the infinitely large. Here we are, Physics of Life Reviews, Consciousness in the Universe, a review of the Orch OR theory. What's that, do you ask? Where in the rabbit hole are we now? The Orch OR theory. By the way, look, see, Roger Penrose, here we are again. This new work builds upon a theory Nobel Prize-winning physicist Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff, MD, first posited in the 1990s, the orchestrated objective reduction theory, Orch OR. Broadly, it claims that consciousness is a quantum process facilitated by microtubules in the brain's nerve cells. Now, once again, I've done more than one live stream on microtubules and the brain, and the fact that microtubules have piezoelectric properties, that they're made of a crystalline structure, and there's certain types of crystal lattice structures atomically that lend themselves to generating electrical pulses if they're distorted by pressure. So if you have a quartz crystal like this guy and you put it under pressure, you can generate electricity from this crystal just by distorting its shape. And the biochemistry in the human body and all the different backup systems that manage all the different aspects of biochemistry, the body temperature at 98.6 degrees, critical. The level of sugar in your blood, critical. The specific gravity, the amount of fluid, the pH, the electrolytes, this subbase of chemistry is necessary to foster catalytic reactions, and catalytic reactions cause standard chemical processes to speed up dramatically. So normal chemistry or biochemistry would be slow, and we wouldn't be able to react fast enough to survive. So to solve that dilemma, this became the world's most sophisticated laboratory for fostering a chemical environment to make catalysts the fastest and the best as possible, so that all my chemical reactions could be snappy and speeded up so I can be quickly reactive. And the only way I can do that is to have catalysts catalyzing the reactions biochemically. So now microtubules are part of a solid structure of a version of the liquid structures in the body called liquid crystals. So it turns out that although my body is made of 70% fluid, it's not regular water. It's biochemical water. It's water that is a special structure that balances on the razor edge of being biochemical water on the one hand, and if it tips over this way, it's a liquid crystal. And a liquid crystal also has piezoelectric effects, which means we can generate electricity from pressure. And the definition of pressure is sound. Sound is a pure energy moving through a medium with force, pure energy moving through a medium at a certain frequency. And sound waves have pressure. If you crank the sound up on your big sub-bass speakers and put your hand in front of the big bass speaker, you'll feel a pressure wave against your skin. When I speak to you, I'm shooting sound pressure waves that impact your body. Some of them go down your ear, but when they impact your body, the slight distortion of your skin cells, right, which are chock full of these little microtubule crystalline structure things, puts pressure on them. It's a sound pressure wave that distorts their shape, which generates a piezoelectric wave of electricity in the shape of the sound wave. Sound waves hit my body, the sound stops and continues through my body as a wave of electromagnetic depolarization from the piezoelectric effect of all the microtubules that make up my cells. Highlights. The Orch OR theory proposes quantum computations in brain microtubules account for consciousness. This is what Penrose and this anesthesiologist were proposing. Microtubule quantum channels in which anesthetics erase consciousness are identified. Evidence for warm quantum vibrations in brain microtubules is cited. Interference of microtubule vibrations are beat frequencies seen on EEG. Orch OR links consciousness to processes in fundamental space-time geometry. Now, that's not far enough down the rabbit hole for you. We're only halfway through here. There's a number of things to unpack here. In my previous broadcast, there was an article, a PubMed article, that showed that these microtubules, the structure of these microtubules are these certain types of proteins that form a crystalline structured tube, and bending this tube generates an electrical pulse. And every cell in your body has got these microtubules. So when I went to school, I learned that your body is 70% water and made up of all these cells. And the cells are basically little bags of water with a thin cellular membrane separating it from extracellular fluid. So intracellular fluid inside the cell, extracellular fluid outside the cell. I'm basically a big bag of water with water-filled cells. And that water is saline, is salty. In essence, from one standpoint, we are creatures of the sea. We were gestated in fluid. We lived the first 9 months of our life underwater, not breathing. Our first experience of anything was sound and vibration, amplified through the water by 5 times. We're born into a world on land with a spacesuit of water. We carried the sea inside of us. So this is basically an organic, very sophisticated spacesuit filled with water, so we can still be water beings walking around on land. The saline solution of your extracellular fluids in your body are very similar to ocean water, to saline, salty. The microtubules inside of here, they pass inside of all the nerves as well. So all the neurons in your brain have microtubules. All the axons that communicate between neurons have microtubules. And in this article a few years ago on the live stream I did there about microtubules, they couldn't understand how anesthesia works. Now, they did realize that when a person is under anesthesia and consciousness sort of evaporates, also gamma brainwave activity evaporates. So in the beginning, they called gamma brain activity cognitive consciousness, because it's the only brain frequency that disappears under general anesthesia. And when the anesthesia wears off, gamma wave return, and so does my cognitive consciousness states return. But nobody could quite figure out the physics mechanism or the biochemical mechanism that would make that happen until they looked upon it in a different way. And that article that I was outlining had to do with the fact that they were proposing that because the microtubules so heavily populate the inside of the axons between neuron to neuron, that the thalamus at the center of the brain generates the pulses that make brain waves happen, and it sends sound pulses down these axons. And because these are piezoelectric, and a sound wave moving down this channel would put pressure on these microtubules and generate a piezoelectric discharge that would be riding at the crest of the wave of the sound wave. So as the sound wave moves down this axon, the leading edge of that sound wave, like the crest of a wave, would be causing depolarizations of all these microtubules as piezoelectric discharges. And those piezoelectric discharges is what is being measured with an EEG, is the after effect of sound waves moving down the axons and activating neurons, the microtubules in the neurons, and summating enough of those tubules that created a coupled oscillator event of a major spark. How's that for down the rabbit hole? So all the cells in your body are put together with microtubules. Like when I was in school, we learned they were just bags of water with organelles floating inside. Now we realize that there's a scaffolding skeletal structure of microtubules that hold all the little organelles and attach to the inside of the cell wall, so everybody's structured. The cells are not just floating free. They're attached from the outside of the cell wall with microtubules to all the other cells, like this picture here, the microtubule network. So this whole network between cells within a cell is a microscopic, microtubular, crystalline structure, skeletal system that is made to generate electrical pulses under pressure, and sound supplies the pressure. It's the big yin yang I've talked about before. Cells communicating and held together through microtubules. And when you look at the microtubular network in the body, it all starts to look like mycelium, the sort of network between tree roots, where the trees connect to each other and communicate to each other through the mycelium. It also looks like the structure of the grand cosmos, these lines that communicate different star nebula systems together. But here we are at the axon and the neurons, this depolarization of electricity as a pressure wave moves through the axons in the system. And look at this from that article is, according to a scheme proposed earlier, sequences of Orch OR conscious moments occurring with intensity of experience correlated with orchestrated normal Orch OR conscious moments every 25 milliseconds in 40 hertz gamma. 40 hertz gamma synchronicity. B, heightened enhanced conscious moments occurring every 12.5 milliseconds in 80 hertz high gamma synchronicity. Now, I call this hypergamma. Remember, when they discovered gamma with open brain surgery, they discovered 40 hertz activity. They also discovered 100 hertz and 200 hertz activity. I called the 100 hertz hypergamma and the 200 lambda. Low-intensity conscious moments occurring every 250 milliseconds, or 4 hertz delta waves. D, gamma wave conscious moments nested in delta waves. These waves may be beat frequencies of faster microtubular variations. So this is very close to what I've talked about before in other live streams, where gamma waves bind sensory information from various locations in my cortex, the 5 senses. So gamma was called the binding frequency. So in the binding frequency, gamma would bind information from various physical locations, seeing and hearing and smelling and tasting, bind them all up into a single place, synchronize them all up together, so my experience out here in the world appeared to make sense. That when something drops off the table and hits the floor, I know the sound it makes belongs to the visual event that they're synchronized up in here. Later, they realized that how it does this binding from separate locations is by gamma modulating theta brain activity. And that means that this rapid 40 hertz is actually going on a 5 hertz modulated ramp. Or the 5 hertz modulated ramp has got little 40 hertz squiggles in it, that one is modulating the other. That's called frequency modulation. That's FM radio. That's how FM radio broadcasts, is by having a carrier frequency with a modulated different frequency on top of it. That's how the brain is lifting all the information from various parts of the cortex out of the brain into a wireless network of communication, an internet of the brain. And that's where the binding takes place. And the key to it is frequency modulation of one brain wave coupled to another brain wave, which is what they're talking about here. These waves may be beat frequencies of faster microtubule vibrations, and beat frequencies is the secret of brainwave entrainment that we do here in these broadcasts. That you are going to listen to a soundtrack that has a carrier wave and a modulation wave, and that's going to force the two hemispheres to synchronize, which is the aha moment architecture of the brain. And it's synchronizing in a certain brain state that we all now share, because we're all being synchronized to the same exact brain state. And with headphones, in a state of synchronicity, where the doors open to higher information. We have to unpack this one, so bear with me. The nature of consciousness, the mechanism by which it occurs in the brain, and its ultimate place in the universe are unknown. I think I disagree with that, but we proposed in the mid-1990s that consciousness depends on biologically orchestrated, coherent quantum processes in collections of microtubules within brain neurons. Now, orchestrated coherent means entrainment. Coupled oscillator networks is what's forming. Brain waves is what's forming, right? Synchronized depolarizations of neurons sweeping across the cortex at a certain speed. And if there's 30 of them per second, it's beta. And if there's 5 per second, it's theta. And if there's 2 per second, it's delta. So consciousness itself is intimately associated with these waves of depolarization of the neurons in my brain. That's what this is all about. Consciousness depends on biologically orchestrated coherent quantum processes in collections of microtubules within brain neurons, that these quantum processes correlate with and regulate neuronal, synaptic, and membrane activity, and that the continuous Schrödinger evolution of each such process terminates in accordance with a specific DOC-Penrose scheme of objective reduction OR of the quantum state. So they're saying that the fact that the neurons are firing in synchrony, and somehow that's associated with consciousness, it's different states of consciousness. They're saying that look past the neuron. It's not the neuron. Everybody's focusing on the neuron as generating the electrical pulse. Where is the electricity coming from that pulse? It's coming from the microtubules. And the microtubules are a quantum thing. That this resonance that's taking place and the depolarization of the electricity of the piezoelectric effect of the microtubules is where the real action is. And it's where they're saying that consciousness itself interfaces with the physical reality of my brain to produce brainwaves. And by watching those brainwaves and the speeds that they depolarize from the microtubules, which have quantum interactions with consciousness itself, is the interface where consciousness meets physical reality. This orchestrated OR activity, Orch OR, is taken to result in moments of conscious awareness and or choice. The choice we're talking about, when I arrive at the next moment from now, consciousness arrives on the scene with an agenda. They're saying that that agenda, that conscious agenda of my choice, what the next moment is going to be, is taking place at the quantum interface in a microtubules inside the brain cells. Wow. The DP form of OR is related to the fundamentals of quantum mechanics and space-time geometry. So Orch OR suggests that there is a connection between the brain's biomolecular processes and the basic structure of the universe. How's that for a statement? So that conscious, Orch OR, once again, consciousness arrives on the scene to make the wave collapse into a particle so that I create reality when I arrive to witness. Schrödinger's cat is either alive or dead, suggests that there is a connection between the brain's biomolecular processes at a microtubular level and the basic structure of the universe. Here we review Orch OR in light of criticisms and developments in quantum biology, neuroscience, physics, and cosmology. We also introduce a novel suggestion of beat frequencies of faster microtubular vibrations as a possible source of the observed electroencephalograph, EEG, correlates of consciousness. We conclude that consciousness plays an intrinsic role in the universe. And you've got to remember that it's these guys who are saying this stuff. It's not mystics from India. It's some of the highest IQ people in science and quantum physics and cosmology who are coming to these conclusions. A conclusion that says we conclude that consciousness plays an intrinsic role in the universe, that beat frequencies from microtubular vibrations is the source of EEG. Wow. I mean, to me, that's wow. Scientific reports. Bundles of brain microtubules generate electrical oscillations. Science News. Discovery of quantum vibrations and microtubules inside the brain neurons supports controversial theory of consciousness. A review and update of controversial 20-year-old theory of consciousness claims that consciousness derives from deeper level, finer scale activities inside brain neurons. The recent discovery of quantum vibrations in microtubules inside brain neurons corroborates this theory. According to review authors, they suggest that EEG rhythms, brainwaves, also derive from deeper level microtubule vibrations, and that from a practical standpoint, treating brain microtubule vibrations could benefit a host of mental, neurological, and cognitive conditions. What I did for 40 years in clinical practice with brainwave entrainment, to use brainwave entrainment to modify the discharges of the neuron's electrical activity on EEG. So if these guys are right, what's really going on with brainwave entrainment is modifying the function of microtubule consciousness interactions in a quantum field. That's what's happening when we put these headphones on in these broadcasts. And those headphones do that to your own microtubules inside your own neurons, where the quantum field meets consciousness itself and orchestrates where that consciousness is going to go. Consciousness, cognition, and the neuronal cytoskeleton, a new paradigm needed in neuroscience. Viewing the brain as a complex computer of simple neurons cannot account for consciousness, nor essential features of cognition. Single-cell organisms with no synapses perform purposeful intelligent functions using their cytoskeletal microtubules. A new paradigm is needed to view the brain as a scale invariant hierarchy, extending both upward from the level of the neurons to larger and larger neuronal networks, but also downwards, inward, to deeper, faster quantum and classical processes in cytoskeletal microtubules inside neurons. That's a mouthful. But what they're saying is that when they're talking about new paradigm of the brain as a scale invariant, that's fractal. That the brain, what they're saying here is the brain is not limited to the little thing inside your head here. The brain is not just this thing. I mean, when I was in school taking anatomy courses, one day it clicked for me. The spinal cord has gray matter. And that's when I realized that the brain is actually this and that and all the nerve roots. That's the brain. This is a specialized portion of the brain for special duties. But what they're saying is that it's scale invariant, scale, size invariant. It means that the consciousness that appears to be in this brain exhibiting EEG patterns actually goes to a quantum scale down inside the microtubules, and it goes to the universal scale outside of what appears to be contained inside my skull. That's the implications of this new paradigm. The brain is scale invariant, extends both upward from the level of neurons to larger and larger neural networks in the cosmos. Right? Mind-blowing. Evidence shows self-similar patterns of conductive resonances repeating in terahertz, gigahertz, megahertz, kilohertz, and hertz frequency ranges in microtubules. These microtubules now are in the law of octaves. As soon as I have a certain resonant frequency in a microtubule, one of the octaves of that frequency is a brainwave. Other octaves of that frequency are in millions and trillions of cycles per second, or in frequencies so low that it's hard to measure them, like gravity waves, which have peak to peak, 100,000 light years. That's what they're talking about here. These conductive resonances apparently originate in terahertz quantum dipole oscillations and optical interactions among pi electron resonance clouds of aromatic amino acid rings of tryptophan, phenylalanine, and tyrosine within each tubulin, the component subunit of microtubules, and the brain's most abundant protein. Let me just get this straight now. These three, the tryptophan and phenylalanine and tyrosine. Tryptophan is the basic component of melatonin. Melatonin is produced by the pineal gland. Pineal gland is associated with the crown chakra. The crown chakra is associated with waking up. with moments of perception of myself existing both in a quantum field, in a regular field, and in a universal field. It's the doorway, the master doorway to the cosmos. So back in the old days in the 60s, people would take tryptophan pills, supplements, and your trip would be magnified. I remember at one point, 15 years ago, 20 years ago maybe, the pharmaceutical companies removed tryptophan from the shelves of pharmacies, saying it was dangerous. Because, we don't want too many people waking up too much, because they won't be good drones working for minimum wage in a cubicle somewhere. Evidence from cultured neuronal networks also shows that gigahertz and megahertz oscillations in dendritic is the fine little branches of nerves that are microscopic. Megahertz oscillations in dendritic somatic microtubules regulate specific firings of distal axonal branches, causally modifying membrane and synaptic. It's modifying how the neurons work with these super high frequency oscillations in the microtubules. The brain should be viewed as a scale invariant hierarchy, with quantum and classical processes critical to consciousness and cognition originating in microtubules inside neurons. That's what this one is saying. But vibration and resonance is a key part of this whole business, that sound waves in a state of resonance, resonating the microtubules, causes pressure wave fluctuations. And those pressure wave fluctuations cause piezoelectric discharges. And the electricity aspect of the brain is actually sound waves generating electricity from pressure waves of sound on microtubules that cause electromagnetic depolarizations. Once again, it's all sort of sound that starts this whole thing. Quantum origin of human consciousness gets preliminary experimental support. Experimental evidence of quantum behavior in neural microtubules could support Penrose and Hameroff's hypothesis that consciousness originates in the microtubules of the neurons, as described by their theory called orchestrated objective reduction, Orch OR. And take a breath here for a second, because, we're back to this guy again. Another round with Roger Penrose. If where we have gone up to this point isn't enough for you, we're going to go further down another rabbit hole with this guy, So put your heavy gear on and fasten your seatbelt. What was before the Big Bang? The theory of Roger Penrose. An attempt to answer the question, what was before the Big Bang, led last year's Nobel Prize winner Roger Penrose to an interesting cosmological concept, in which our universe is just one link in an endless chain of its predecessors and descendants. So Penrose was a great proponent of what's called the oscillation universe theory. The Big Bang theory, it has so many problems, because the first question that comes up is what was there before the Big Bang? And physicists go, well, we don't think about those questions because we can't measure it. It's like, what? Seems like a really important question. So Penrose, took this whole thing on. Primordial sound waves from the Big Bang. So once again, the Big Bang was not an electromagnetic event of photons and light. It was a sound event. And the crossover frequencies of the ripples of the sounds coming out, like a pebble in a pool of water making ripples coming out. The universe was filled with these spherical ripples of sound waves, which is pressure waves moving out. And as those spheres crossed over each other and reflected off each other, it created these impact zones, which create something similar on a universal scale to sonoluminescence, which I did a whole portion of a live stream on. The fact that when two transducers are facing each other in a spherical container of fluid, of water, and sound waves come out, those sound waves hit each other in the center and create light. And create light that is hotter than the sun and brighter than the sun in a oscillation called cavitation, where it forms a bubble in the water that collapses. Cavitation creates that light explosion. And then another bubble forms and cavitation collapses and forms another. And so those rapid flashes are so fast that you can't see the rhythm, but it's an acoustic modulated oscillation creating light. And what he's saying is that's what's happened with the Big Bang. Sound created the light, which tracks with everything every religion has ever said. In the beginning was the Word. In the beginning was Nada Brahma. Everything is sound. Travels back to your own personal experience in the womb. The very first thing you ever experienced when the five senses came online the first time was sound and vibration. You're in the dark, so this isn't working. Nose and mouth are filled with fluid. They're not working. It was a sound experience for 9 months. It's called baryon acoustic oscillations. Roman will detect vestiges of sound waves that once rippled through the primordial cosmic sea. Who's Roman, by the way? I'll answer that question. NASA's Roman Space Telescope to uncover echoes of the universe's creation. NASA's Nancy Grace Roman Space Telescope will detect vestiges of sound waves that once rippled through the primordial cosmic sea. Radioactive swirls in the cosmos may rewrite the origin story of the universe. Respected Oxford mathematician Roger Penrose sees swirls of radioactivity in a sky map as evidence that the Big Bang isn't true. These Hawking rings suggest to him that the universe expands and collapses over and over. Sir Roger Penrose, an alternate theory of the Big Bang. New evidence of cyclic universe claimed by Roger Penrose and colleagues. So here's the cosmic micro background radiation from the Big Bang. Unexpected hotspots in the cosmic microwave background could have been produced by black holes evaporating before the Big Bang. So says a trio of scientists led by mathematician, physicist Roger Penrose, and paper presenting new evidence that our universe is just one stage in a potentially infinite cycle of cosmic extinction and rebirth. Other researchers, however, remain skeptical that the microwave background really does contain signs from a previous aeon. So basically what he's saying is the universe is repeated rebirth and dying, controversial claim by Nobel Prize winner. A map of the cosmic background radiation, CMB, in the universe with circles which may signify events that took place before the Big Bang. These circles is the key. Frozen ripples in a pond, but cosmically large. Measuring the universe with baryon acoustic oscillations. These circles are the sound waves propagating out and getting larger and interacting with each other and crossing over. And at these cross points is where I propose cavitation events take place at a universal scale. Cavitation events that cause an explosion of light and form a star, or a black hole, or a white hole. So the pre-bounce phase of the universe. So basically what he's saying is that that before the Big Bang was our same universe. So the universe expands and contracts, but not completely to zero. It compresses to a point where it creates a universally large cavitation event of a massive, gigantic explosion that we see with sonoluminescence, except on a universally large scale. So it compresses down, causes a cavitation explosion, explodes out, eventually comes back, creates another explosion, and so what we end up with is an eternal oscillation of sound waves. It's a tone, it's a sound, it's the Om that is talked about in Indian literature. Nada Brahma, the world is sound, all originated from a sound. It's a sound wave, an oscillation sound wave, that every time it comes together, it causes a cavitation explosion. What looks like Big Bang. That's what this is pretty much talking about, the bounce. It got this compressed, and that's what causes the explosion. A never-ending series of expansions and contractions and expansions and contractions. Sounds a lot like the theory in Hinduism of past lives. That my life is an expansion, contraction as well. I'm born, I grow, I contract, I quote, die, am reborn, contract, reborn and contract, reborn and contract. My whole life, my whole existence is an oscillation, is a sound wave. Scientists discovered clues pointing to another universe before ours. And as a matter of fact, that's what you would have to be looking for if you believe that this eternal oscillation of the universe is where the, quote, Big Bangs come from. That you should see remnants of that previous universe that contracted, because it didn't contract to zero, it contracted to a compressed only enough to create the cavitation explosion. But some of what that explosion would happen would suck some of the remnants of the previous universe that was pretty old into this brand new one. And so looking for things that break the rule of a new universe with things in the new universe far back as you can see with the Webb telescope, show ancient structures where they shouldn't be. Artist's impression of the pattern of baryonic acoustic oscillations imprinted on the large-scale distribution of galaxies. So this initial explosion caused ripples in the vacuum, which is not a vacuum. It's a boiling nexus of quantum foam. Scientists find proof of a universe that existed before ours. Scientists have found evidence of previous universes in the night sky in the form of leftovers of black holes. Gravity wave signals are being analyzed to detect gravitational memory effect. The universe has memory from the previous incarnations, just as people do, because we are a microcosm of a universal textbook of universal law. It's a fractal. An ongoing meta-analysis of gravity wave signals may soon prove that space remembers. Permanent memory imprints in space-time may soon be detected, which will be a validation of Nassim Haramehn's work and our research team's prediction that space has the property of memory, in which we described how the informational imprint of memory in space is what holographically generates time. That is to say that 4D spacetime is a hologram of a 3D information network. That's not deep enough for you. I don't know what it is. These are the remnants of previous universes before they contracted to form what we call the Big Bang. These circles of primordial sound waves that cause interactions at every place they cross with each other. And if you zoom it to the opposite end, the quantum dance to the beat of a drum, researchers observe how energy of a single electron is tuned to surrounding atoms. Same business as brainwaves, same business as microtubules in a state of oscillation that cause tubules next to them to sympathetically resonate at the same oscillation and summate into a piezoelectric discharge from the neuron itself, which we read on an EEG machine. Using a novel type of ultrafast microscope, a team from Regenberg has now succeeded in directly observing with atomic resolution and ultrafast timescales how the energy of a single electron is tuned by the vibrations of the surrounding atoms. Remarkably, they were also able to specifically control this process. Such discoveries could be crucial for the development of superfast quantum technologies. Remarkably, they were also able to specifically control this process of tuned vibrations of groups of atoms. That's entrainment. That's the atomic level of entrainment that we're doing with headphones. The similarities between the universe and the human brain, astrophysicists and neurosurgeons discover. And here we are to the bottom of the rabbit hole. S. James Gates Jr. This guy's no slouch. He won the National Science Award. So once again, we've got big minds with high IQs coming out with stuff that you would expect to see from Sanskrit texts from 4,000 years ago. His whole work was with supersymmetry and string theory, right, which says that the smallest of the smallest of the small inside quantum particles is just vibrating strings, and depending on how those strings vibrate, forms different atomic and subatomic particles. That a quark is a quark because this string is tuned to that frequency, and a proton is superstrings tuned to different frequencies. So the whole universe is a orchestral musical piece based on music theory of subatomic quantum level strings vibrating at different frequencies and different relationships of tones based on music theory. Now that requires supersymmetry, which means that every particle has an antiparticle, has a mirrorized particle. And this guy has spent his life researching that and has come up with new interesting stuff. Supersymmetry is a theory which stipulates that for every known particle, there should be a partner particle. For instance, the electron should be paired with a supersymmetric selectron. Quarks ought to have a squark partner, and so on. This is all the way back to the most ancient text on the planet, the I Ching. Yin-yang symbol. It's the positive and the negative. It's the quark and the schmark. It's the mirror of every particle has its mirror antiparticle. Basic quantum physicists discovering what has been said now since the beginning of recorded history. Supersymmetry and the controversial error correcting codes. And here's where this guy comes in, James Gates. At String Theory Debate on March 7th, claims to have found error correcting codes within string theory. This is the first announcement of this, quote, discovery. Gates, who has spent most of his life working in physics, and more specifically supersymmetry, says his recent findings indicate that, yes, traces of computer code do exist. We may very well be living in a simulated universe. Hidden inside of these equations, there are computer codes, says Gates. They're the kind of computer codes that make browsers work. That's just kind of weird. Now, we've already talked about the fact that it's not so much a simulation, it's a quantum multidimensional movie in the mind of God, with a pixel depth that is a Planck length that is too small to see through. Most of us sit at our computer screens and we type on the keyboards. And if we're using a browser, we're sending strings of zeros and ones. But in the transmission process, there's always some fluctuation. So a 0 you type here because of static in the line might be read as a 1 at the other end and vice versa. And so, in fact, when you type on the keyboard, your computer is doing something behind your back. Namely, it throws in a bunch of extra zeros and ones, and these things are called error correcting codes, so that the computer on the other end can figure out if there were bits that were being flipped back and forth. And that's how you get accurate transmission of digital data. Among the codes that are used for this purpose are a special class of codes that are called block linear self dual error correcting codes. These are the codes that we find buried in the equations of superstring theory. Supersymmetry and the error correcting codes that he found in the math when he's looking at supersymmetry. And the only place in the universe other than that where you find this kind of thing is error correcting codes in the DNA, in your genes. The genes have error correcting codes in the DNA to keep everything straight. The only place where this is found, aside from the math that he dug out in supersymmetry at the basis of superstring theory about the nature of the core substrate of reality itself. A place so deep in the quantum field, it's the basic substrate of the core root of all reality. There is a certain sense in which I would say the universe has a purpose. It's not there by chance. Roger Penrose. Which brings up the ultimate question that we don't have time to talk about today, which is, what is the purpose of all this? What's the purpose of this movie? What's the purpose of me being in it with you? Why are all of us here in this sort of grandest story of all time? Why? The ultimate question, where all of it comes together, the largest of the large and the smallest of the small, with us standing in between at the nexus point where consciousness arrives on the scene and makes all of it pop into existence. And that's why we're here today. To put on our headphones and to align our consciousness brainwaves together, actually I should say, align our microtubules at a quantum field level where our consciousness can mingle and mix, and we can stand on the precipice of deciding whether Schrodinger's cat is dead or alive. But basically to flesh out what is the world going to look like if we can tip the scales. So here we go. So here we are with the little doggy.
Hi. Say hi, Mogu.
Yes, and you're correct in the chat that we do have a doggy gate. Bring her closer.
Sure.
Check out this incredible little dog.
Say hi, Mogu. Hi, Mogu.
One blue eye and one brown eye.
She sees herself. She's like, what's going on? So cute. She also has an Instagram page. I'll link it in the chat if anybody wants to follow her growth. Okay, Mogu.
Thank you all for being here. I'll keep the chat open for a little while longer. Thank you all very much for being here with me. I know this went a little longer than normal, but this was deep down the rabbit hole, so my apologies for anybody who had a time constraint. I'll see you next week. Thank you all very much.